The buzzards had been following them for 2 days. Sarah Mitchell counted 6 of them, now black specks against the Nevada sky, waiting for her to fall. Her daughter Emma's hand grew weaker in hers with each step across the scorching Badlands. The child hadn't spoken since yesterday. Her lips were cracked like old leather, her green eyes dulled to gray. Sarah's throat burned with each breath. The Mojave stretched endless before them, a sea of sand and broken dreams. She'd wrapped Emma in her faded denim jacket when the girl stumbled an hour ago. Now that jacket hung like a shroud over the 7-year-old's shoulders. Behind them lay Carson City and every door that had slammed in their faces. The diner owner who'd laughed when she asked for work. The church minister who'd quoted scripture about unwed mothers while his wife clutched her pearls. Even the sheriff Fat Belly straining against his badge had ordered them out of town by sundown. "We don't harbor vagrants," he'd said, never once looking at Emma's hollow cheeks. The desert heat pressed down like God's own judgment. Sarah's boots had split at the seams yesterday. Each step drove sand into the wounds on her feet. But she kept walking because mothers don't stop, not when their babies need them. A memory stabbed through the heat Jack Morrison's smile the day he'd promised her the world. Smooth-talking Jack with his card tricks and whiskey breath. He'd vanished the night she told him about the baby, leaving nothing but empty bottles and broken promises. 7 years later, his absence still echoed in Emma's face. The sun hammered down without mercy. Sarah tried to wet her lips but had no spit left. She'd given Emma the last drops from their canteen at dawn. Now her tongue felt like sandpaper against her teeth. "Mama," Emma's voice came out as a whisper. "Are the birds gonna eat us?" "No, baby." The lie scraped Sarah's throat raw. "They're just traveling. Like us." But Emma's eyes too old for 7 saw through it. She'd learned early that the world had teeth. Sarah's knees buckled. She caught herself, pulled Emma tighter. Not here. Not like this. Her daughter weighed nothing now light as prairie grass. Each day the desert stole more of her. Ahead, a Joshua tree twisted up from the hardpan, its arms reaching toward an unforgiving sky. Shade. Just a scrap, but shade nonetheless. Sarah forced her legs forward, counting steps to keep from screaming. 20, 30, 50. They collapsed against the tree's rough bark as shadows lengthened across the valley. Sarah cradled Emma, feeling the bird flutter of her daughter's pulse. The buzzards circled lower patient as undertakers. Then hoofbeats, slow and steady cutting through the desert silence. Sarah's spine went rigid. Out here riders meant trouble or salvation, and she'd learned not to bet on miracles. The sound grew closer, measured, unhurried, like someone who owned every grain of sand they crossed. Sarah pressed Emma against her chest, her eyes scanning the shimmering horizon. A figure emerged from the heat waves, tall in the saddle, moving with the land's rhythm. Sarah's hand found a sharp rock, her last defense. She'd fought off worse than death before. The rider materialized fully as the sun began its descent. Wide shoulders, weathered hat, a bay horse that moved like water over stone. He saw them and slowed, but didn't stop immediately. Instead, he circled wide the way a man approaches a wounded animal. Sarah lifted her chin defiant even now. "Keep riding," she croaked. "We don't need charity." The man studied them from beneath his hat brim. When he dismounted, it was with deliberate care. He led his horse closer, stopped 10 feet away. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then he pulled a canteen from his saddle, set it on the ground between them, backed away. Emma's hand shot out before Sarah could stop her. The girl's fingers shook as they closed around the canvas-covered metal. "Drink," the man said. His voice was low, worn smooth as river rock. Sarah's pride warred with Emma's need. Pride lost. She helped her daughter drink water spilling down the child's chin. Only when Emma sagged back, satisfied, did Sarah allow herself a sip. The water tasted like life itself. The stranger crouched in the dust, keeping distance between them. "Name's Luke Callahan. Got a place about a mile east. You're welcome to it." Sarah's hackles rose. She knew what men wanted from desperate women. "We're fine here." Luke's eyes, gray as gunmetal, took in Emma's fevered cheeks, Sarah's bleeding feet. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." Something in his tone made Sarah look closer. Scars on his hands. Lines carved deep around his eyes. This was a man who knew what it meant to need saving. He gestured to his horse. "The girl rides. You too, if you'll allow it." Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to spit in his face and choose death over another man's mercy. But Emma's breathing had gone shallow, and the buzzards were circling tighter. She nodded, one sharp as a blade. Luke lifted Emma like she was spun glass, settled her against his chest. Then he offered Sarah his hand. She stared at it, calloused, steady, patient, before placing her palm in his. He helped her mount, then swung up behind them. The horse moved forward at Luke's touch. Sarah sat rigid between his arms, aware of every breath, every shift of weight. Behind them, the Joshua tree shrank to nothing. Ahead, the promise of shelter waited in the dying light. She tried to remember this was temporary, that she couldn't trust what seemed kind. But exhaustion blurred her edges, and she found herself leaning back just slightly into something that felt almost like safety. The land rolled past in waves of sage and sand. Emma's head lolled against Luke's shoulder. Sarah gripped the saddle horn and wondered if she was riding toward salvation or just another kind of ruin. As they crested a rise, she saw a cluster of cottonwoods marking water, the outline of buildings against the darkening sky. Real shelter, real hope, or maybe just another place to lose everything. The horse's hooves beat steady as a heart. Sarah closed her eyes and let the rhythm carry her forward toward whatever waited in the approaching dark. Luke Callahan's ranch materialized from the desert like a mirage made solid. Not fancy weathered wood and honest work, but it breathed permanence into the Nevada dusk. The main house squatted low against the wind, its tin roof catching the last light. A red barn stood proud, despite peeling paint. Beyond that, cattle grazed in pastures carved from stubbornness and sweat. Sarah's eyes cataloged every detail: exits, hiding spots, the distance to the road, old habits from running too long. Luke reined his horse beside a cottonwood where a stream whispered promises. He dismounted, first lifting Emma down like she was made of soap bubbles. The girl stirred, whimpering. "Easy now," Luke murmured. He'd spread a wool blanket in the shade before Sarah's feet touched ground. Let her rest. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, brushing dust from Emma's face. The fever had broken, but left the child weak as water. Luke disappeared, returned with hardtack and a tin cup. He set them within reach, then busied himself with the horse, giving them space to eat with dignity. Sarah broke the bread small, coaxing Emma to chew. Each bite felt like victory. Only after her daughter managed half did Sarah allow herself a taste. The hardtack scraped down her throat, the most beautiful pain she'd ever felt. Night fell fast in the desert. Luke built a fire with practiced hands, flames painting shadows across his weathered face. He pulled out a pipe, but didn't light it, just turned it between his fingers, like he was working through a problem. Sarah found her voice rusty but steady. "Why?" Luke's gray eyes found hers across the fire. The silence stretched until she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because needing help ain't a sin," he said finally, "and turning away from it is. No preaching, no payment expected, just truth served, plain." Sarah looked down at Emma, sleeping, her small chest rising and falling like answered prayers. Something shifted in Sarah's chest, a door she'd nailed shut, creaking open. "We'll move on come morning," she said. Luke nodded, leaning back against his saddle. "If that's what you want." But morning brought Emma's laughter. The child had discovered the chickens, her delighted squeals echoing across the yard. She chased them with newfound energy, her illness retreating like a bad dream. Sarah watched from the porch, her heart caught between joy and fear. Luke appeared with a pair of child's boots. "Found these in the barn. Previous owner left 'em." He set them by Emma's torn shoes without fanfare, already moving toward the corrals. Sarah's hands shook as she laced them on Emma's feet. They fit perfect. When had anyone last given without taking? Days blurred into routine. Sarah attacked chores like they were debts to pay hauling water until her shoulders screamed scrubbing clothes until her knuckles bled. She mended every shirt she found, patched holes that didn't exist. Motion meant purpose. Purpose meant earning her keep. Luke never asked her to work, never told her to stop. But sometimes she caught him watching from the barn, pipe unlit expression unreadable as desert stone. The ranch hand Miguel treated her with careful respect. His wife Rosa brought tamales on Sunday, teaching Emma Spanish words, while Sarah pretended not to cry into the wash bucket. But town was different. When Sarah ventured in for flour, the whispers started before she'd crossed Main Street. Women clutched their skirts aside. Men's eyes lingered too long, calculating. At Morrison's General Store, the owner's wife spoke loud enough for all to hear. Some women have no shame latching onto any man who'll have them. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin high. She'd survived worse than sharp tongues. Pastor Williams cornered her outside his black coat, flapping like buzzard wings. "Sister, I'm concerned about Yorkie arrangement. A woman must guard her reputation." She wanted to ask where his concern was when Emma was starving. Instead, she nodded politely and walked away. His warnings trailing after her like smoke. That night she sat on the porch step watching Emma chase fireflies in the gloaming. The weight of the town's judgment pressed heavy. She'd leave tomorrow, save Luke the scandal of harboring a fallen woman. Luke emerged from the shadows, settling beside her with a soft grunt. The wooden step creaked under his weight. They sat in silence, watching Emma's joy paint light trails in the darkness. "I know what they're saying," Sarah said finally. "I won't let it touch you." Luke studied her profile in the lantern light. "Let them talk. You don't understand." "I understand plenty." His voice carried an edge, now sharp as flint. "Understand folks love to judge what they ain't walked through. Understand a good woman when I see one." The words hit Sarah like a flash flood. She turned away, but not before he saw the tears. 2 nights later, Emma's fever returned with vengeance. Sarah woke to her daughter's whimpers, skin burning like coals. Panic clawed at her throat. Not again. Not when they'd come so far. Luke appeared in the doorway, took one look, and sprang into action. He rode hard for the doctor, while Sarah bathed Emma with cool cloths, whispering prayers and promises. The child shook like autumn leaves, too weak to cry. Dr. Morrison, no relation to smooth-talking. Jack arrived as dawn cracked the sky. He worked with gentle efficiency, mixing powders and checking Emma's pulse. "Scarlet fever," he pronounced. "Touch and go." The next 3 days blurred into nightmare. Sarah never left Emma's side, cooling fevers and coaxing medicine between cracked lips. Luke became her shadow, bringing water, stoking fires, catching her when exhaustion made her sway. He never spoke of leaving, never suggested she'd brought trouble to his door. He simply stayed solid as mountain stone through the longest nights Sarah had ever known. The 3rd night, Emma's breathing went shallow. Sarah pressed her ear to her daughter's chest, counting heartbeats like rosary beads. Luke's hand covered hers, rough and warm and steadying. "She's a fighter," he said. "Like her mama?" Sarah looked up, found his eyes inches away. In them she saw no pity, no calculation, just a man who'd chosen to stand witness to her pain. "Why?" she whispered again. This time he answered different. "Because some things are worth the standing." Dawn brought miracles. Emma's fever broke like a wave on stone, leaving her weak, but breathing easy. Sarah sobbed into her daughter's hair, while Luke dozed in the chair, his vigil finally ended. She stepped onto the porch as morning painted the desert gold. Her bones ached, her heart felt scraped raw. But beneath the exhaustion, something new had taken root. Not love, she didn't trust that word. But maybe its cousin. Maybe hope. Inside, Emma stirred. Luke's chair creaked as he woke. Sarah gripped the porch rail and faced the rising sun. The crossroads waited patient as the desert itself. Stay and risk her heart. Leave and keep it safe, but empty. The choice pressed against her ribs, sharp as the morning air. Behind her she heard Luke's boots on the floor, Emma's weak but steady breathing. Ahead, the sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows. Sarah Mitchell had run from plenty in her life. But standing there with the desert warming around her and her daughter safe inside, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found something worth the staying. The morning after Emma's fever broke, Sarah found Luke in the barn, mending a saddle with careful stitches. Sunlight slanted through the gaps in the boards, painting him in bars of gold and shadow. She'd rehearsed her words all night, but they died on her tongue when he looked up. "Emma's asking for you," she said instead. Luke set down his work, his gray eyes reading the war in her face. "That all she's asking for?" Sarah's hands twisted in her apron. "She wants to know if we're staying." "Smart girl." He stood leather creaking. "What's her mama want?" The question hung between them like dust motes in the light. Sarah had built her life on leaving first before anyone could leave her. But Emma's laughter drifted from the house and her armor cracked. "I want to stop running," she admitted. "But I don't know how." Luke stepped closer, careful as he'd been that first day in the desert. "Maybe start by standing still." That afternoon, Sarah walked to town alone. Let them whisper. Let them stare. She had flour to buy and a daughter to feed. But at Morrison's General, something had shifted. Rosa was there, her warm smile cutting through the ice. She spoke to Sarah in rapid Spanish, ignoring Mrs. Morrison's pursed lips. "She says Emma is like sunshine," Miguel translated, appearing at Sarah's elbow. "And sunshine belongs wherever it chooses to shine." One ally became two, then three. The schoolteacher Miss Chen approached about Emma starting lessons. The blacksmith's wife offered her sewing work. Not everyone the righteous still clutched their judgment tight, but enough. Enough to breathe. Still, Sarah couldn't shake her fear. That night, while Emma played with a cornhusk doll, Luke had made Sarah cornered him on the porch. "People will talk worse if I stay. They'll say I trapped you, that I'm living off your charity." Luke's jaw tightened. He was quiet so long, she thought he'd gone mute. "Then, Sarah, I got 640 acres of land, and exactly no one to leave it to. Got a house that echoes at night and a heart that's been empty since." He stopped, shook his head. "People been talking about me for years, saying I'm too broke to find a wife, too proud to admit it. Let 'em add this to their collection. But your reputation." "My reputation?" He laughed, short and sharp. "I'm a drunk son who clawed his way to respectability through blood and drought. You think I care what the church ladies whisper over tea?" Sarah studied his face, seeing new lines, old pain. "What happened to you?" Luke's eyes went distant. "Lost my family to cholera when I was 15. Spent 10 years working other men's cattle, saving every cent. Bought this place from a widow heading back east. Been alone since." He met her gaze. "Until a stubborn woman and her daughter stumbled into my life." The revelation shifted something fundamental. He wasn't saving her out of pity. He was saving himself, too. Days passed in a dance of almost touching when they passed in doorways, almost saying what their eyes already knew. Emma thrived brown from sun and round from Rosa's cooking. She called Luke Mr. Luke with shy affection that grew bolder each day. Then came the storm. It rolled in from the mountains like God's own fury, black clouds eating the sky. Lightning split the darkness. Thunder shook the house. Emma woke screaming, terrified by nature's violence. Sarah held her, but the child's terror only grew. Then Luke appeared in the doorway, hair wild from sleep. Without hesitation, he scooped Emma into his arms. "Just noise, little bird," he murmured, settling in the rocking chair. "Sky's having itself a tantrum like when you're mad at those chickens." Emma giggled through her tears. Luke kept talking spinning tales of thunder horses and lightning dancers until her breathing steadied. Sarah watched from the doorway, her heart cracking wide open. This man, This good patient man who'd shown up when the world had written them off, who'd offered shelter without payment protection, without possession, who held her daughter like she was precious because, to him, she was. Morning dawned crystal clear, the storm leaving the world washed new. Puddles reflected the sky. The desert bloomed with sudden flowers as if the earth itself celebrated survival. Sarah found Luke at the corral, watching his horses play in the mud. Emma had run ahead, chasing butterflies born from the rain. Luke. His name felt like a prayer on her tongue. He turned something in her voice, making him still. "I can't drift anymore," she said. "Emma needs stability, roots, a real home. And you—" His voice was carefully neutral, but his hands gripped the fence rail, white-knuckled. Sarah stepped closer, her heart hammering. "I need to stop being afraid of what I want. Which is—" She pressed her palm against his chest, felt his heart racing to match hers. "This, you, us, if you'll have us. Not as charity cases or burdens, but as family." He covered her hand with his, the word fierce and final. "Marry me, Sarah. Not because you need saving, but because I need you. Both of you." The world tilted. Sarah's knees went weak. "You don't know what you're asking. I'm used goods, a fallen woman with another man's child. You're the strongest person I've ever met." His free hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't felt fall. "And Emma. She's not another man's child. She's the daughter I've been waiting for." Sarah broke, then sobbing against his chest while he held her steady. All her walls, all her armor crumbling in the face of love that asked nothing but her presence. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Emma's squeal of delight told them she'd been listening. She barreled into their legs, wrapping her arms around both. "Does this mean Mr. Luke is my papa now?" Luke knelt, eye level with the child. "If you'll have me." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "I already picked you," she announced. "Mama just took longer to figure it out." They married the following Sunday. Not in town, Sarah had no interest in performing for those who'd judged her. Instead, Pastor Chen, from the Chinese settlement, officiated in Luke's parlor. Miguel stood witness. Rosa held Emma's hand. The blacksmith and his wife came along with Miss Chen and Dr. Morrison. Sarah wore a simple blue dress Luke had ordered from a catalog, pretending it was for Rosa. Her hair hung loose, decorated with desert flowers Emma had gathered. Luke stood tall in his one good suit, his eyes never leaving her face. "Do you take this woman?" Pastor Chen asked. "Every day for the rest of my life," Luke answered, steady as stone. When he kissed her gentle, and sure Emma cheered loud enough to spook the chickens. The small gathering applauded. Rosa had cooked enough food for an army. They feasted as the sun set the house finally full of the laughter it had been built for. That night, with Emma asleep and the ranch quiet, Sarah stood on the porch beside her husband. The word still felt foreign on her tongue. Husband, partner, home, regrets, Luke asked, his arms settling around her shoulders. Sarah thought of the road that had brought her here. The hunger, the shame, the buzzards circling. Then she thought of Emma's laughter, Rosa's tamales, the way Luke's eyes crinkled when he smiled. Not one, she said, and meant it. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal. Somewhere in the desert, other desperate souls were running. But here in this place, carved from wilderness and will, Sarah Mitchell Callahan had finally stopped, had finally found what she hadn't dared hope for, love that didn't demand, but offered, family that chose you back, and a future written not in sand, but in stone, permanent as the mountains, enduring as the desert itself. Luke pulled her closer. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For walking into my desert. For letting me walk into yours." Sarah turned in his arms, her hands framing his weathered face. "We saved each other. Every damn day," he agreed, and kissed her, under the vast Nevada sky. In the barn, the horses nickered softly. From the house came the sound of Emma's peaceful breathing. The ranch settled into night, complete at last, and in the darkness, two people who'd known too much loneliness held tight to their hard-won joy, knowing that some stories, the best ones, begin in the desert, but end in bloom.